Good morning, everyone. I know we have a hard stop at 11 for one board member. If we can, 11:30, yeah. If it was 11, that would be a very quick meeting. So we will get started, but we will continue afterwards if just for informational purposes for those who can stay, if folks have additional comments or questions. All right. Welcome, everyone. Clerk, can I have the roll call, please?
Belvedere.
Present.
Concord.
I'm here.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera.
Here.
El Cerrito. Fairfax.
Here.
Mill Valley.
Here.
Pinal. San Rafael. Walnut Creek.
Here.
Quorum established.
Thank you, Clerk. Board announcements. Does anyone in Concord have any announcements? All right, seeing none. San Rafael? No announcements. Item number 3, public open time for items not on the agenda. We have one member of the public here shaking his head no. All right. Any members of the public in Concord?
There are no members of the public in Concord.
Thank you. Anyone on Zoom?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
All right. Number 4, a report from our CEO.
Thank you so much. I'll run through this quickly. I wanted to thank the committee for your flexibility in making this meeting happen today due to the Labor Day holiday. Really glad we could squeeze in a meeting. I also wanted to let folks know that we are recording our committee meetings now. So today, this meeting will be recorded, which can be helpful if we need to go back and re-listen to anything. Just wanted to make you all aware that we're being recorded. And then, unfortunately, I have to pass along some really difficult news. Greg Tillman, our Associate Director of Rates, has passed away at the end of July. He made so many contributions to the agency. He was an amazing human being and really left a lasting impact on staff. We'll be saying a few words about him at the upcoming September board meeting, but I just wanted to make sure you all are aware. And then also in early August, I wanted to let folks know that Alexandra McGee, our VP of Strategic Initiatives, presented on our virtual power plant program at the EPA annual Brownfield Training Conference in Chicago. So it's getting a lot of attention. It was well received, and there were a lot of great questions about our innovative financing tools, social impact bond, and the VPP revenue streams. So we'll have more to come on the VPP soon. Also, I wanted folks to know we have an RFO out right now for a new scheduling coordinator or potentially continuing with our existing scheduling coordinator. Just wanted folks to know that that's out and we'll be soliciting responses soon. And we have a power purchase agreement coming to our technical committee next week. So we're really excited about that. Lastly, just to make sure it's on your calendars, our annual board retreat is scheduled for October 16th. That's a Thursday. It's going to be at the MCE Concord office. So all day in Concord. Our new office is really beautiful. So if you haven't been there yet, this is a great opportunity to see it. And the focus of that retreat is going to be looking at how we're balancing load and supply. So we'll be really doing a deep dive into how we handle generation and how we handle our virtual power plant to adjust load to meet our supply. That's it for my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dawn, and our condolences to the staff and to Greg Tillman's family. I hadn't heard that news. Very tragic.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments on the CEO report from Concord? San Rafael? All right. Next item, item number 5, consent calendar. Do any directors wish to pull an item from consent? I believe Director Kohler had an amendment.
There were some amendments. I don't need to pull anything. There were amendments that I communicated with staff, and they've made some amendments to clarify one of the votes.
Thank you, Director Kohler. And looking to our attorney, do we have to speak those amendments, or is it enough?
Yeah, I'm happy to just share that so that the
Yep.
committee knows what's being voted on. In one of the items regarding agenda item number 6 for the 24/7 methodology, we made it clear that that methodology was just applicable to the 24/7 by deleting plural from premium and just making it premium that applies to the 24/7. So it's a clerical edit, and that'll be represented in the final minutes that are sent for signature.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve consent calendar, Darling.
And I will
Second,
second that.
Beckman.
This is Nakamura.
Director Darling made the motion. Director Beckman seconded. Can we please have the roll call?
Belvedere,
Yes.
Concord,
Yes.
Corder Madera,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Mill Valley,
Yes.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 6, review of draft FY 24-25 financial statements and draft write-up on currently known facts, decisions, or conditions. Turning to Dawn or our finance team.
Yeah, I think Vicken is going to kick us off here and then turn it over to Maida. I just wanted to thank Baker Tilly for being here with us, and then also Mike Maher with Maher Accountancy, who helps with MCE's day-to-day financial tracking and reporting. I'll turn it over to you, Vicken.
Oh, thank you, Don. I'm glad you mentioned that because we can't see the rest of everybody that's there. So thank you. I just wanted to introduce Maida Strauss to the committee. She's our Vice President of Finance. And Efren Oxley, he's the Manager of Finance. And together they have been really concentrating on the audit. So I'll pass it to you, Maida, and Efren, as you see fit.
Thank you, Vicken, and good morning, committee. Thanks, everyone, for being here today for this special meeting. Today, we are going to go over our draft financial statements, and that was sent to you in a packet. And the plan is to go over any questions that you might have and collect your input from the current known factors section and answer any other questions that you might have for the draft financials. And after that, we will incorporate the input and send the draft back to the auditors, and then they are going to be able to do their final review, which has a few steps to be completed. And then finally, they will issue the financial statements together with their opinion. And our Ryan and Aaron from Baker & Tilly, our external auditors, are on the line and ready to answer any questions the committee might have. So to start our conversation, we are going to put up on the screen the documents that we sent on the materials, and we're going to do a quick review of what those documents are and the input from you, and we're going to be open to receive any input and questions from the committee.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maida. So on the screen, we have the statements. We have the 3 key statements, starting with the statement of net position, which is looking at MCE's assets and liabilities. This was part of your board packet as well. So I'm gonna stop here for a bit and open it up for any comments or questions on the numbers here.
All right. Shall we turn to Concord?
This is Director Darling. The only question I had was on the operating reserve fund, the 70 million. I'm assuming we didn't need to use that in 25, and we're just keeping it there so that if we need it in 26.
According to Vicken Sargent, the CEO of MCE, per board resolution, that is a saving amount we can have to defer the deposits into our days of cash on hand to absorb any unforeseen events in a fiscal year. We did not have any for 24-25, so we did not touch it. The full amount is there.
It has been freakishly cool, so that's what I expected.
It was a very mild summer,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Director Nakamura, do you have any questions? And
No, my only
apologies,
comment. No, that's okay. My only comment was that summer's not over, but it has been mild. It's been great.
Good point. Director Kohler, any questions? Director Wilkinson? Director Beckman? All right, no more questions on this. We can move on.
Okay, so moving on to the next statement. The next one shows MCE's statement of revenues and expenses. So we're looking at revenues from sales of electricity here on the top section. And then we're looking at operating expenses right beneath. And then third section here shows non-operating revenues. So these are revenues from not related to the sales of electricity. This is revenue from investments and interest income that the agency receives. And lastly, we have the change in net position, which is effectively MCE's net income for the year, or net gain. For fiscal year ending 25, the change in net position was just shy of just a little bit over $13 million, which increased the total net position at end of year to $416 million, or an increase of about 3.3%. So I'm gonna open it up for questions and comments.
All right, we'll start in San Rafael. Any questions here? Any questions in Concord? Oh, Director Wilkinson.
Hi, I have a few questions. The first one is in relation to the cost of electricity. It looks like you exceeded budget by about $80 million versus what was budgeted for. My question there is, in the write-up, it seems to say that the delta is captured in operating expenses. Captured in operating expenses is the cost of energy, which was significantly higher due to increased prices for renewables and payment of energy invoices earlier in the calendar year than anticipated. Can you explain the second part of that sentence? Because if you've got an accrual-based accounting system, why does the timing of the invoices matter?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question, Director Wilkinson. So this was an energy contract that we originally assumed was going to be spread across the 12 months for calendar year 25, but the supplier decided to provide the quantities much earlier. So we had to accrue for those expenses much earlier, and that's the expense that you see here, meaning we were expecting, for instance, to only accrue $18 million in expenses related to this contract in that fiscal year.
Right.
But because the quantities came in earlier than expected, we had to accrue $36 million, which increased the expenses for that particular year. But in turn, it also decreases the expenses for the current fiscal year, since we had originally intended to spread that contract in the current fiscal year.
So it's not the timing of the energy invoices, it's the timing that you receive the energy.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so that's where I think my confusion lies, because it's not the invoices. The second question I have is in relation to staff compensation. So it looks like the 24-25 fiscal year staff compensation was 24.7 million, according to the statement of net position. The budget that was approved for staff was 22.8 million. So that's an overage on staff compensation. Is that an apples for apples comparison, or have I misunderstood?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by apples to apples comparison?
Meaning they're both on a when you do your budget, it's on an accruals basis too. You're not using a cash basis. So there's about a 2 million expense excess on staff compensation. And I guess the question I have there is, at the local government level at least, if there is overspending on, or staff needs to spend more on staff compensation, they have to bring back a budget amendment, because there's only a certain amount that's been approved within the budget for compensation, and they can't exceed that without at least informing their council, and in, I think, most cases, requiring a budget amendment. So do you not do that here? Is that, because I look back to the prior year and it looks like you overspent in the prior year as well. So is that just not a policy here that you have to inform the board that you're spending more than anticipated on personnel?
So I'm not certain if the budget was over. There are multiple budgets for MCE. They have the operating budget, and they also have ones that are funded by program funds, grant
Right.
funds. So for
Understood.
these financial statements, they're consolidated, all of the staff compensation. So it's possible, I'd have to take a look at the budget. That's not part of the audit.
Okay.
It's possible that the budget on the operating budget, the staff costs are only part of the total costs that roll up to the audited consolidated statements. That's possible.
So I guess it would just be good to know that if there's a way to do that analysis, just to see whether all in we have exceeded the all in budget. And if we have, I think that's worth a discussion as to whether that's okay to do that without bringing it to the board first, because I know at the local government level, our staff are required to do that. So you could be entirely right, and maybe it's not a comp, maybe it's not an apples for apples, so it'd be good to know that.
Yeah, Director Wilkinson, adding to Mike Maher, we will present the budget results in the board meeting when the audit is finalized by the auditors. And this entire compensation, it does have the grants portion on it. So that's why we cannot compare with the budget, because there's a large amount that we received back from grants, and it's all included in there.
Okay, so all I'm asking is that if we can see that as a spreadsheet, just to see what the
Yeah.
different aspects look like, to make sure that we're not exceeding budget on personnel without
Yes,
authorization.
perfectly. We are planning on showing that at the
Okay.
board meeting.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wilkinson. Turning to Concord, Director Darlene Nakamura, do you have any questions?
We have no questions here.
And apologies, I can't see the video anymore, so you'll have to speak up if you have anything to say. All right, we're ready to move on to the next slide.
Okay. So our next statement here is the statement of cash flows, and that is exactly what it sounds. It's looking at our incoming and outgoing cash from our operations, from our activities related to any capital outlay, and also our activities related to investing. This is particularly looking at the balance sheet, and then just looking at the year-over-year change to determine the cash increase or decreases in these various sections. The net change in cash and cash equivalents at the end of the fiscal year was an increase in $15.2 million, bringing our total cash and cash equivalents at the end of the fiscal year to $226 million. So again, can I open it up for questions?
Any questions in Concord?
No questions in Concord.
All right, San Rafael, Director Wilkinson.
I have one question, and it's more just to clarify my understanding on something. So again, the written report suggests that there was a drop in cash flow because of increased cost of energy and payment of energy invoices earlier. And so the question I have there, and I think it's a piece that I don't understand very well, which is in relation to the cost of electricity. So the net position shows a cost of energy of 768 million. The payment to suppliers on the cash flow statement shows 705. And on the reconciliation, it shows accrued cost of electricity increasing by 90 million. And firstly, I don't see how those reconcile. And secondly, it seems to run in to conflict with the written statement from staff that explains the lower increase in net cash on the basis of a decrease in accruals, and this seems to be implying an increase in accruals of the cost of electricity.
Yeah, well, there certainly was an increase in the accruals.
Right.
For the staff write-up, where you're seeing that, because it's the second time you've pointed that out, I was trying to find it.
So
Where's that one?
it's stated twice. So on the third page, at the top of the section where it's got net position at the end of the year, in that paragraph underneath there where they're describing the net position, the third line down says that it's due to increased prices for renewables and payment of energy invoices. It should just be receipt of energy, I think, in that, rather than payment of energy invoices in relation to the net income. And then in the summary of statement of cash flows, about halfway down, there's a sentence that begins, MCE saw 30.8 million in inflow of cash from operating activities. And part of that was due to payment of energy invoices earlier in the year. So there's two questions I have here. I don't understand, the two don't seem to add up, but I'm sure it's just something I'm missing on the reconciliation, but I'd love to understand what that is.
It could be if there's an inconsistency in that language, we need to clean that up. I see what you're saying. That
Right.
accrued cost of energy did increase.
By 90 million.
Right.
Right.
Quite large.
Yes, which conflicts with the written statement.
I'm certain the cash flow and the income statement are reconciled appropriately to each other. But
I'm
most
sure they are
likely-
too, because you've got auditors looking at this. I just don't understand it. I'd love for someone to have to explain it to me because the numbers don't seem to reconcile.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it doesn't. I think that the description of that, you're right, seems to contradict.
Yes, it
some of
does.
that. So we'll take a look at the wording there. But the financial statements themselves do seem to be in alignment. But yeah, if we have
Absolutely, they absolutely are in aggregate correct. I'm sure it's just that one line item where I don't see that the reconciliation matches the difference between the net position on an accrual basis and the cash flow statement.
Okay. Yeah, we can.
So it'd just be good to, from my
No,
understanding,
I
it would be good
agree.
to know why that doesn't reconcile.
I agree.
But you have the auditors on the line. I'm sure they can answer that in like a second.
Perhaps the reconciliation of cash flow is a complicated component, right? There's a lot of different pieces in it. So
Right.
on the fly, it might be hard to see exactly if there's discrepancy. But yeah, we can take a look at the wording. I'm mostly concerned that the description, the verbal description of
It's
it
completely
may
wrong.
not be
Right.
matching the actual numbers.
Yes.
So we'll take a look at that and make sure it's all in alignment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we can move on to the next slide.
Great, so that ends the section on the statements. The next attachment here is a write-up, which is part of the management discussion and analysis of the audited statements. So this is part of the packet that you'll see in September when we do bring the final version to your board. This section is, we're able to make edits subject to the guidelines that were listed in the write-up, but we do have some freedom here to comment on currently known facts, conditions, or decisions. So again, I'm gonna leave this up on the screen and open it up for any comments or questions.
Starting in Concord, any questions?
Not me.
All right, San Rafael.
I have one quick, it's more of a question rather than a certainty about an addition, but obviously as we move towards hourly GHG accounting, that could have quite significant impacts. And I'm wondering whether it's worth any description of that. I know it's a known fact and circumstance in that we know it's coming, and whether there's anything, I didn't know what, but whether you've thought about whether that should be included in the write-up in any way.
Sure, I'm going to ask a Viken to wade in here.
Director Wilkinson, did you mean the resource adequacy time of use, or you mean I didn't hear you right on the GHG? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's just with the state requiring, is it by 2028 that you've got to report your GHG emissions on an hourly basis? And so based on the meeting last month, you're starting to think about that, certainly in terms of municipalities, and whether there's any broader statements that should be made at this point in terms of any challenges that that might be posing, or any risks or anything else in terms of that's a known condition. We know it's coming. Is there any reason to provide any sort of explanation around that?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Now I understand. This write-up is specifically addressed for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. So I don't think that this is the location where we need to address future risks. Maybe there's other places we can look at in our business write-up. But this is specifically looking at the fiscal year that we have left behind, and we want to approve that. So although I completely understand in the risk factors in what you're mentioning, Director Wilkinson, but I don't think this is the right place to address that, because there are quite a few other risks as well. I hope I'm making sense to you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to know that you'd thought about it.
Yeah.
And then the only other comment I had on the write-up, where you say that this cost savings from the remedial action scheme is 20 million, can you just go back and confirm that? Because I seem to remember when you presented that to the board, the net saving was less than that. So if you can just clarify that to be 100% sure that's a correct number, that would be great.
Sure. The 20 million is the loss of energy, and we can get into other computations too. But we can look at that to see what that number should be based on some other considerations. We can look at that, yes.
Okay, and maybe just have Mike look at it as well, just to make sure that you're reporting it on a net basis rather than a gross, which is what it looked like when you gave the presentation originally.
On the, if I heard you right, you meant look at the net.
The net cost saving that you're anticipating from if and when you implement the RAS, that the net saving is 20 million. If you can just confirm that is correct, because that's what you state here. I had the impression it was the gross rather than the net, but if you can just go back and check what that was in that original report to make sure that's correct, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Any more questions? Seeing none, we can move on.
Yeah, this finalizes all the documents.
Great. Maybe we'll pause and see if there's members of the public who wish to provide public comment. Yep, Dan, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Dan Sagadin. This is a dramatic swing in financial results. 156 million swing to the negative, 183 million in cash from operations to the negative in 1 year. So the question is, why did this occur? It's not the PPAs, presumably, because those are fixed in cost. So it's presumably the fixed for floating rate swaps, of which you've got $250 million. It's the index plus contracts, it's RA, it's unhedged CAISO load. We don't know from the explanation given. The explanation is given as increased price for renewables, the payment of invoices, et cetera. So this is kind of a major question that I would think this committee would be asking. And it's just a prelude to 2 really obvious questions. The first obvious question is, can anything be done to mitigate this surge in costs? Specifically, are there any implications for our hedging strategy? Are there any key learnings for our hedging strategy? And the second is, are there any implications for our pricing? Should we reprice at a more frequent interval? Whatever it is. These are things I think should be talking about. Those are the issues I'd like to see in this 1.5 pager that was presented. I think it's totally relevant. But if it's not in that form, then I think it should be addressed in another board forum. So let me pause there and say, members of the executive committee, you're dealing with a lot. You're elected, you have constituencies with huge ranges of issues. You're on several boards. You got a lot going on. I have a ton of respect for you. I do. I could not do your job. Let's be clear about that. But if you don't know the answers to the two questions above, then I really think you should reconsider having a finance committee that can dig into this in deeper level of detail and have these discussions with management who's well-informed enough to ask intelligent questions and to do this. Or you, as XCOM said they would do, you should have quarterly or more frequent updates from management that covers these financial issues and what's going on in real issue-oriented discussion. So those are the bigger picture issues raised by these results. That's what I think you guys should be thinking about, the executive committee. Don't lean too much into, oh, well, we have experts who are advising MCE. Don't lean too much into that. There is no expert that can predict energy prices. And there is no good expert who can come in here and give you a good layman's explanation of the hedging strategies, what the risks are, and what you should be considering. Similarly, don't lean too much into, oh, well, we have plenty of reserves, we're fine. Don't get too upset about this. If we could have had improvements in our strategies that created tens of millions of dollars, we want that money for ratepayers, for programs, for more renewable energy, whatever you decide. We want that money. Finally, I just want to say, I do want a strong and thriving MCE. I want a strong board. I want strong board committees who have informed, good, educated discussions, issue-oriented with management. That's going to make MCE stronger. It's going to make you better for the community. It's going to make the management stronger, and it's going to make you stronger. That's what I want. And if we aren't doing that, why are we here? What are we doing? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Does staff want to respond to anything we heard in public comment? No, not at this time. All right, turning back to the board, do we have any more slides or comments from staff? Or are you looking just for us to discuss if there's anything further? Director Andre, who that would be a member of the public in this instance. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. I do want to echo and support what the prior speaker just said. In looking through the financial statements, I also felt that there was an inadequate explanation with respect to what was happening with the dramatic increase in energy costs. I don't think a one-line explanation is sufficient to understand what is going on there. And I do believe that the board should dive deeper into what is causing the increase in energy costs and what steps can be taken to mitigate the energy cost increases. I also believe that, or I also think it's a good idea that the board gets more frequent updates on financial performance versus budget. The energy costs are $100 million over budget and $200 million over the prior year. So, that's a significant increase. I think, we would not be fulfilling our fiduciary duty if we did not dig deeper into that, into those numbers. And also, I'd like to better understand why MCE has $509 million in cash reserves, actually $579 million in reserves if you include the operating reserve for rate stabilization. We just talked about raising rates, and yet we have 270 plus days of reserves available on our balance sheet. So what are we building such reserves for? And lastly, I do have questions for the auditor with respect to last year's audit findings, whether staff or the management team has taken steps to remediate the significant weakness that was found in last year's audit findings. I think that there needs to be in writing from the auditors that that steps have been taken to remediate the significant weakness, and that has been done to the auditor's satisfaction. And lastly, I'd like to understand whether there were any audit findings in this year's audit And if there weren't any significant weaknesses or material deficiencies, were there findings that the auditors felt that the board should know? Were there adjustments that the auditors felt that the board should know about? And I do support the prior speaker's suggestion that a finance or audit committee should be, we should have an audit committee so that we have the opportunity, the board has the opportunity to properly review and ask questions about the audited financial statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Andre. Are there any other members of the public who wish to provide comment?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Great, fantastic. All right, turning to Concord, any further questions or deliberative comments?
I see no raised
right.
hand. Concord.
In San Rafael? Yes, Director Beckman.
Appreciate the public comment. Obviously, we are operating in an industry that is inherently incredibly volatile, but I would appreciate if staff could just take a couple minutes to respond at a very high level to some of the public comment that we've heard.
Yeah, I would like to respond. Thank you. First, I'd like to say that you are correct. We are operating in a very volatile industry, and those of you who were on the board last year may remember the large amount of time on our board retreat agenda that was spent just talking about power supply prices and the volatility that we were experiencing last year. This is an audit that includes last year. There was a lot of volatility in power supply prices, both for resource adequacy, which we had seen coming, but what I think folks in the industry didn't see coming was a real spike in the cost of renewable energy. Alongside that, we were also managing new requirements, regulatory requirements coming from the CPUC that all load serving entities purchase a whole bunch of new resources of specific technologies, including renewable technologies. And so our hand was forced to buy power really ahead of schedule, ahead of the time that we had planned to, ahead of the time that we felt it was needed. But we were forced to make those expenditures. Unfortunately, the costs of buying that power that is mandated by the CPUC lands on customers. And we did spend a lot of time talking about that at our retreat last fall, as many of you may recall. We're happy to revisit that conversation. I certainly, in response to the comments from Director Andre, I think we should send her the packet. That would be, there's a lot of good content there about the power supply prices and the volatility and what we're doing to try and address that through our hedging strategy and our risk oversight committee. We do use best practices in addressing volatility, but the market is, we can't control the market. We are subject to what's happening in the market. Fortunately, we do have a lot of fixed costs in the portfolio, and that helps balance out the volatility that we see. I also wanted to respond to the questions about the audit from last year. Just as a reminder, there was a recommendation made related to how we calculated uncollectible amounts, and that we make an adjustment to that because after COVID, we saw higher rates of payment. And that was the recommendation that was made, the singular recommendation that was made by the auditor in the draft statements. In the final statements, that recommendation was incorporated. It was a great suggestion. That is in writing. So just want to make sure that I want to correct the record on that it's available for anyone to take a look at. And I wanted to also respond to the question about the amount that we have in reserves. I know we're here today to talk about the prior fiscal year close. The reserves that we've accumulated are there for rate stabilization. We do anticipate some challenges going into the next fiscal year. We'll be starting to talk about that in the coming months. But having those reserves there is likely to be a huge help. The other thing I want to correct that was mentioned in one of the comments, I think someone noted that we're talking about raising rates. We aren't talking about raising rates. That hasn't been brought up at this meeting. I don't anticipate discussions about raising rates at any point in the near future. So just want to correct that. Fortunately, we do have reserves in place that can help us if we are needing to find some ways to address challenges in the next fiscal year. And then the last thing I want to touch on, because it was brought up in one of the comments, is the idea of creating an audit committee or a finance committee. That was discussed in our executive committee meeting. We actually had an executive committee special meeting last November where that was one of the key agenda items. So there was a good amount of time was spent doing research on that and having discussion at a couple of sequential meetings on that. So just wanted to remind folks that was talked about less than a year ago. So hopefully those comments are helpful. Again, I know we're here just to talk about the audit, so I don't want to get too far afield, but hopefully those responses were helpful. Did you want to add anything, Maida?
Just one quick add. Just to get back to Director Wilkinson's questions on the personnel. Final numbers were about 2% under budget for the personnel line.
If you can just send the breakdown, that would be really useful just to see.
Yes, we'll send all of that in the budget package for the board with all the information for you.
Mayura, can I ask a follow-up on that?
Sure.
So when we do the budget, my understanding is we are looking at the operating budget, but it also is including kind of projections on the earmarks and other grants we've gotten. Is what happens is then we don't get some of those and new ones come up that we get? Is that kind of the way to look at that? And then we're kind of funding that. So when we're approving as a board contracts or grants, we're kind of approving that almost as a budget adjustment. Is that the way to look at that, or is it kind of separate?
Kind of separate.
Okay.
So a quick way to explain is that we mostly talk about our operating budget. And the one that Director Wilson is pointing out is the operating budget. But and then we have our EE and energy efficiency budget that has a lot of personnel expenses on that. And when we talk about our financial statements, it has everything. So even on the cash from the financial statement, there are some funds there that are actually the CPUC funds, because it's everything for MCE. So we have four budget documents, but we concentrate more on the operating budget. We tend to talk more about it, but the other ones are also important, and they all combined goes into the financial statements. And that's when we read the statements, that's where we see that amount. And the difference, it's almost 7 to 8 million on the staffing that we receive it back from the CPUC.
Mike?
Thank you very much. I was remembering back to the spring. We had a discussion at this committee about staff levels and plans to hire. And then we provided feedback. A new proposal came that had different numbers in terms of staff at the board. That was approved, right? So it's not fair to say that the staff can then hire additional beyond that, right? That's kind of the lay of the land within that, unless something comes back to us. Okay.
Yes.
Does that kind of answer the question you had on that? Because
yeah, I just want to see the numbers broken down so that just to clarify that's how it works. I do have a couple of suggestions. With all of the public comment, I do think when you bring the audit to the full board, a clear write-up, not within the audit, but separate from that, to explain how energy costs exceeded budget on the different items within that. Because we're always told you're, 95, 98% hedged. And so this massive swing is really confusing. And so I think it's really important for the board to have a more micro understanding of energy costs and where things went awry vis-a-vis budget? Because I'm sure internally when you are doing your calculation of cost of energy, it's a very detailed breakdown that you don't share with the board. We need more information to know why energy costs so exceeded target, and it's not sufficient to just say renewable costs went up. That's not
Okay.
a sufficient explanation for the board.
I'm going to have to walk out of here in about 2 seconds. So I want to try something here. I want to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation with an additional sentence, the second paragraph where it talks about all the different things that are going on, increased costs, availability, generation assets, add a sentence that says, going forward, MCE will continue to examine these risks and continue to develop strategies to hedge and mitigate them. Because that's what we've been doing. That's what we talked about during our retreat. That's when we've talked about all these different things that we're doing, and we just need to incorporate that here because it sounds like people are concerned that we're not doing that. So that would be my motion, and I could reread the sentence if people need it.
Just a clarifying question for council. This is listed as a discussion item. Are we able to make motions on it?
Absolutely. If the executive committee would like to excuse me, treat this as an action item, you are permitted to take that action and make a motion. It's intended for us to just receive your feedback, and then the team will go back and look at it. So we're happy to take in that that comment that Director Darling sent. But if you'd like to make a motion, you all may do that.
Okay. So Director Darling, I think the piece here, right, is we don't have to approve anything today, but if we
Okay.
want to make an additional motion on that, that's fine, provided we still have a quorum. Which
I
we
was
do.
under the impression that we needed action on this. So
No, we don't need any action. This is an informational discussion item.
Correct.
And
No action
is-
needed.
I'm going to go to my meeting, and you're going to lose your quorum. So it sounds like you guys are good. You're on the right path.
Well, I'll ask folks in San Rafael, do you have any comments, or does anyone want to second or amend
I agree
Director
with
Darling's
what
motion?
Director Darling suggested. I think that's a good change that will make it more clear what we're doing. The other thing I would suggest, Don, is you talked about some of the reasons why renewables have gone up so much last year. And I think maybe I'm not as eloquent as Director Darling, but maybe adding another sentence about what you talked about would be helpful, because there was a lot of discussion at the board. And I think if you can just add another sentence about more of the rationale for why that happened, would be great. So thank you so much.
And it looks like potentially Director Darling had to go. Is that correct?
She did step away,
Okay.
and but I would like
So
to
maybe we can just,
know what she was asking us to do. I think that I support that.
great. So we don't have a quorum, so we can't vote, but we can still provide staff direction, and I'm seeing shaking heads, so in nodding heads, so we should be good on that.
Can
All
I-
right, Director Wilkinson?
Yeah, so just continuing, again, qualitative is not enough. We need quantitative in terms of explaining energy cost shifts. And I think that would be good as part of the packet for September to include a better explanation of that rather than just a verbal. And I seem to remember that not this year, but last year, there was at least a semi-annual update on where we stood on the budget. And I believe did we not do this year? Because I remember Garth did it, and then since he left, we didn't do one. Is that correct? Or did I-
Yes, we do that in the end of the year because we don't have data yet. We are still on the May, closing the May for this year, so we don't have the data yet. Usually we do it towards the end of the year.
So you'll bring the first 2 quarters ending in September
Yes,
in
that's
December.
That's what we do every year, yes.
Okay. Okay, because I think just more frequent updates, data-driven updates to the board on where we stand financially, given these big swings, is incredibly
Absolutely.
helpful.
Yes. As of right now, we only have 2 months closed.
Right.
So that's why we haven't brought updates.
Okay, thank you.
And
Right.
Chair, I wanted to offer,
Yeah.
before we lose the auditors, I know some board members may be interested in having a moment with auditors without staff present. This is a public meeting and it's being recorded, but if that's of interest to folks, staff would be happy to step out of the room.
Great.
Also, I wanted to add that we'd also be happy to schedule another round of one-on-ones with auditors, just like we did before
Mhm.
this meeting, for any XCOM members that would like to have a conversation one-on-one with the auditors.
Great. Do any directors want that time with auditors, without staff?
Dawn, can I just ask how many people had one-on-ones with the auditors that you offered? I mean, the
We
auditors are
have
here,
not-
so they can probably answer that.
Yeah, I do not know.
I believe four. Jessica would know.
So
Hi,
maybe I'll
Maida.
just jump in. Sorry, this is Ryan from Baker Tilly. So I met with 3 different board members. Aaron, I'm not sure if there was another one that I couldn't attend, but it's either 3 or 4. So
That's right.
okay.
And was that offered to the full board or just XCOM? The full board. Okay. So potentially there could be more ahead of the board meeting, right?
Is this the way you plan to do the audit going forward? Because this is obviously a radical shift from what's happened for the last 9 years. So is this process now how this is going to work?
The audit is typically handled the same way. So I don't know what you mean by a radical shift.
We've always
hired a
had, for the last
professional
9
firm.
years, there's been an ad hoc audit committee.
Yeah, sometimes we do have an audit committee and sometimes we do things without an audit committee. But what stays the same is we always hire a professional outside firm to handle the audit for us.
But we've had an ad hoc audit committee stood up for the last 9 years.
That could be the case. We have to be careful about not overusing ad hoc committees that could be misconstrued as standing committees. So we try to use them only when needed, when there's a need for discussion outside of the public eye. This year, it was determined that having more transparency would be a good change.
So the alternative, that would be a standing, now that you want more transparency, the alternative would be a standing audit committee, so that you didn't have to worry about membership, but that you could get into the detail of these things in a more meaningful way with the auditors. Is that something you're considering, or you now believe that bringing it to XCOM and one-on-one meetings with the auditors is more efficient?
Could I just add a little bit of color there? Any standing committee that we create would be subject to the Brown Act and would be open and public the same way that this committee is. And so if we wanted to go about an an audit committee standing meeting, we would be doing the same thing that we are here, where it would be all discussed open and public. So I'm not sure that there's a difference between an audit committee and the XCOM from the purposes of it being open and public.
I guess it's just that the people who typically volunteer for an audit committee have financial knowledge, can understand financial statements.
Well, the financial expertise really comes from the third-party audit firm that we hire. But certainly having our board members engaged in the process is important. But I think you're asking, what is the preference going forward? Really, this was discussed in the executive committee meeting last November. And it was determined in that meeting that a separate audit committee and a separate finance committee wasn't needed. So as far as your question about whether we were planning to form one, we're just following XCOM's guidance from last November's meeting.
I'm sorry to push back, but that discussion that happened at the end of last year, at that time there was an ad hoc audit committee, and had existed for 9 years, and so there was no expectation that there wouldn't be one this year. And then staff determined that that was more transparent to do it that way. So the conversation that was had last year maybe should be had again in light of the fact that there's no longer an ad hoc audit committee.
If I can jump in and maybe offer a suggestion, I think what we're talking about here is the process for next year, right? So maybe at some point, I won't be chairing this committee next year, but whoever the chair is, maybe I would recommend that they suggest and staff brings an item ahead of the audit process to talk about what it is this committee prefers, right? We've had it 2 different ways now. We've had it with the ad hoc committee in the past. We have it this time with individual meetings in this meeting. We could do a standing committee. I know we tabled that last year, but it's up to the committee, right? There wasn't a majority to do that. But have that maybe, I don't know, in the spring, late spring, sometime at that point, and talk about the process and determine at that point what it is that this committee prefers. Staff open to that?
Appreciate that, Chair. I think I find helpful is if Director Wilkinson, if you could help me understand what you're looking for that is not being received in this open and public environment. If we do an audit committee, that would be open and public. And I think that's just I'm not seeing the difference in what you're looking for, and I would find that helpful.
So certainly with the audit last year, there were a series of meetings between the ad hoc audit committee and the auditors with various staging of information and review of draft financial statements, and then some significant conversations beyond that. This environment makes that a little bit more difficult. It's all recorded and public record, and that makes it a little bit more difficult potentially to have fluid conversations. And so I think I would still think an ad hoc audit committee is the better way to go for those purposes. And I also think that people who generally volunteer for an audit committee, whether it's ad hoc or standing, tend to have more financial experience. And whilst recognizing that we have external auditors and external finance people, checks and balances and our fiduciary oversight suggests that people with that expertise might have more value to bring in a concentrated committee rather than in an ExCom committee. But other members might disagree with me entirely, but that is my experience of other audit committees and finance committees, is that people who are on those committees have more expertise. But it might be that other members of ExCom prefer this practice to the one that we had before, and that's a that's a valid conversation.
I have thoughts on this, but I do think probably next spring is probably the time to have that discussion. And I think it would be good for the committee, now that we've had kind of these different ways of doing it, to weigh in on that. I think there's pros and cons to both, personally.
I appreciate the feedback.
All right. Any final comments, Director Nakamura?
No, I have none at this time. Thank you.
All right. Director Kohler, Director Wilkinson. We've lost a couple of our members, so I'll just end the meeting at this point, if that's okay. Thank you.